Blood spattered across Julia's face as the client's fist connected with her jaw. She stumbled backward, crashing into the rough-hewn dresser that adorned her small room at Madame Scarlett's brothel. The copper taste of blood filled her mouth as the well-dressed businessman advanced his eyes, wild with a rage that had erupted from nowhere. "Smile when I talk to you, whore," he hissed, grabbing her throat. "I paid good money, and I expect gratitude." Julia clawed at his fingers, black spots dancing before her eyes. Her lungs screamed for air. After 3 months in this hell, she knew the rules: submit, endure, survive. But something inside her, some final thread of dignity, would not yield tonight. Her fingers closed around the neck of a whiskey bottle on the dresser. She swung with desperate strength, connecting with the man's temple. Glass shattered. He staggered momentarily, stunned, blood trickling from where shards had embedded in his scalp. "You'll die for that," he snarled, drawing a small revolver from his coat. "Scarlett will understand when I tell her you tried to rob me." Julia froze. 17 years of life flashing before her eyes, her family's farm, her father's tears as he handed her to the brothel caravan, promising he'd return once the drought broke. "Just until the rains come," he'd whispered. The rains had never come. The doors splintered inward with explosive force. A massive figure silhouetted in the doorway, broad-shouldered, dark hair falling in twin braids across a buckskin vest. In one fluid motion, the intruder disarmed the client, twisted the gun away, and struck him unconscious with a single blow to the sternum. Julia pressed herself against the wall, confused by the intervention. The man turned toward her, revealing the weathered face of a Comanche warrior, his dark eyes assessing rather than predatory. "Now you die here," he said simply, voice low and steady. "Or you come now. Choose." Beyond the shattered door, sounds of chaos erupted from the saloon below. Breaking glass, gunshots, screams. Through her window, Julia glimpsed flames beginning to lick at the stables behind the brothel. A diversion. "Who are you?" she managed to ask, clutching her torn dress closed. "I hawk and mist," he replied, already moving toward the window. "Had sister once. Men like him took her." He nudged the unconscious client with contempt. "No one saved her. Someone saves you tonight." Decision made in an instant, Julia grabbed a shawl from a hook and her small pouch of meager possessions. As she moved to follow, the door burst open again. Mary, an older girl who had shown Julia small kindnesses during her captivity, rushed in. "Julia, thank God you're alive." She thrust a leather pouch into Julia's hands. "Take this. Money and names, including the man Madam plans to sell you to. Judge Wallace. He brands girls like cattle. Keeps them at his ranch outside Black Ridge." Shouts echoed from the hallway. "They're coming," Mary urged. "Go. Come with us," Julia pleaded, grabbing Mary's wrist. Mary shook her head, a sad smile crossing her face. "I can't leave yet. My sister Sarah is being held at Wallace's ranch. I need to stay, gather more information." She pushed Julia toward Hawk and Mist. "I'll find you when I can. Now go." Hawk and Mist guided Julia onto the roof, through the window. The night air hit her like freedom itself after months of confinement, cool and alive with possibility. They scrambled across the shingles as gunfire erupted below, sliding down to a lower section before dropping into the rear yard. "Horses," he whispered, leading her to the stables where 2 mounts stood ready, a sturdy pinto and a dappled mare. As Julia mounted, her hands trembling with adrenaline, she glanced back at the brothel. Through an upstairs window, she glimpsed Mary's face watching their escape. Something in the other woman's expression, determined yet forlorn, imprinted itself in Julia's memory. A promise made without words. They rode hard into the Wyoming night, the vast darkness swallowing them as behind them Madame Scarlett's establishment burned against the star-scattered sky. Julia's heart pounded with terror and exhilaration the intoxicating taste of freedom mingled with the paralyzing fear of recapture. Hawk in Mist rode slightly ahead, his back straight, his awareness extending to every shadow and sound. When they crested a rise after nearly an hour's hard riding, he raised his hand for halt, head cocked as he listened to the night. "Riders," he stated flatly. "6, maybe 7, following our trail." Julia's newfound freedom suddenly felt painfully fragile. "What do we do?" Instead of answering, Hawk in Mist slid from his horse, placing his ear to the ground. His expression hardened as he rose. "One is tracker. Good one. Come." They continued at a measured pace, conserving their horse's strength, while Hawk in Mist employed every trick to confuse their trail crossing rocky ground, doubling back through streams, even having them ride single file along a fallen tree trunk to leave ground untouched. Despite his efforts, the distant riders gained ground. A shot rang out, the bullet whistling past Julia's ear with terrifying proximity. Her mare stumbled suddenly, favoring its right foreleg. "She's lamed," Julia called to Hawk in Mist, panic rising in her throat. He circled back, face impassive, but eyes revealing calculation. "Must leave her. You ride with me." As Julia transferred to Hawk in Mist's pinto, another shot cracked through the night. He jerked against her back, a grunt of pain escaping his stoic facade. Warm wetness seeped through her dress where his chest pressed against her. "You're hit," she gasped. "Ride on." He gritted through clenched teeth, maintaining his grip on the reins. His voice dropped to a whisper. "There. Cave entrance. Horses cannot follow inside." They reached the narrow opening in a cliff face with their pursuers less than a quarter-mile behind. Hawk in Mist practically threw Julia from the horse's back. "Go in," he ordered. "I lead horse away, make false trail. They'll kill you." Julia protested, clutching at his blood-soaked arm. Something flickered across Hawk in Mist's face, surprise at her concern. "Better one die than two," he said simply. "Go. Hide deep." Before she could argue further, he wheeled the pinto around and galloped along the cliff base, deliberately leaving visible tracks. The last she saw was his silhouette against the starlit plain before he disappeared around a bend. Heartbreaking for the stranger who had risked everything to save her. Julia squeezed through the cave entrance. Darkness enveloped her as she felt her way deeper into the earth, finding eventual shelter on a natural stone shelf where exhaustion claimed her. The sound of footsteps jolted Julia awake. Heart hammering, she pressed against the cave wall, straining to see in the dim dawn light filtering through from the entrance. A silhouette approached, female familiar. "Mary," Julia whispered incredulously. "It's me," came the confirmation as Mary stepped into a shaft of light. She looked different outside the brothel, younger, without Madame Scarlet's required cosmetics, but harder too, a revolver gripped confidently in her right hand, a canvas sack over her shoulder. "How did you find me?" Julia asked, torn between relief and suspicion. "Followed you," Mary replied, offering Julia a canteen. "Waited until things calmed at Madame's, then slipped out. Been tracking you since." She scanned the cave. "Where's the Comanche?" Julia's voice caught as she explained Hawk in Mist's sacrifice. When she finished, Mary's expression had grown grim. "I heard gunfire in the distance, but couldn't see what happened," she said. "He led them into a box canyon. 3 men followed him in." "Is he dead?" Julia asked, dreading the answer. Mary shrugged. "Don't know, but we have bigger problems." She opened her canvas sack, revealing supplies and a crude map. "After you escaped, I overheard Madame talking to one of Judge Wallace's men. Your escape has accelerated their plans. They're moving all the girls from his ranch tomorrow night, including my sister." "Moving them where?" "East. Private train car. Once they cross territorial lines, they'll be impossible to trace." Mary's eyes hardened. "This is our only chance to save Sarah and the others." Julia stared at her in disbelief. Just the two of us against Judge Wallace and his men. It's suicide. Mary smiled thinly. Not just us. There's a Comanche camp 15 miles northeast. Your friend mentioned it at the brothel once. If he survived, that's where he'd go. And if he didn't, then we find other allies. Mary's jaw set with determination. I'm getting my sister back, Julia, with or without you. Julia considered her options. Running seemed the safer choice, disappearing into the vastness of the territory, starting fresh somewhere no one knew her. Yet something in her had fundamentally changed during her ordeal at the brothel. A steel core forged in suffering that would not permit her to abandon others to the same fate. I'm with you, she decided. But we need a plan better than just the two of us charging in. They set out for the Comanche camp as the sun climbed higher, Mary leading them on a circuitous route that avoided obvious trails. Her woodcraft impressed Julia, who had grown up on a frontier farm but never mastered these skills. Madame Scarlett's clients talk a lot when they're drunk or finished. Mary explained when Julia commented on her knowledge. The cavalry captain who visits on Thursdays likes to brag about Indian movements. I've been mapping their positions for years just in case. By late afternoon, they spotted smoke rising from a distant copse of trees in a shallow valley. As they approached, riders materialized behind them, 5 Comanche warriors, on painted ponies, weapons at the ready, expressions impassive. Mary raised empty hands, motioning for Julia to do the same. We're looking for Hawk and Mist, she said clearly. A Comanche who helped us escape from bad white men. The warriors gestured with weapons for them to walk toward the camp. Children stared as they passed between lodges, some hiding behind their mothers, others boldly touching the strange white women's clothing. At the camp's center, before a large teepee, decorated with painted symbols, an elderly man emerged, gray hair in twin braids, face deeply lined, but bearing proud and strong. Do you seek Hawk and Mist? He asked in heavily accented English. Yes. Julia stepped forward. He saved me from bad men. He was shot protecting me. Please, is he here? Is he alive? The elder studied her face before nodding slightly. He lives. Barely. Arrowmaker's woman tends his wounds, but the white man's lead still poisons his blood. Relief weakened Julia's knees. May I see him? The elder led them to a smaller teepee, set apart from others. Inside, lit only by filtered sunlight and a small fire. Hawk in Mist lay on a pallet of furs, his upper body bandaged skin ashen, breathing labored. An elderly woman ground herbs beside him, her movements precise despite gnarled fingers. Hawk in Mist, Julia whispered, kneeling beside him. His eyes opened slowly, recognition dawning through pain. You live, he managed. Thanks to you, she confirmed, fighting tears. You saved my life. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good trade, then. The elder spoke to the healer woman in Comanche, then translated her response. Running Deer says the bullet passed through his shoulder, but took bone fragments with it. If infection doesn't claim him, he may live, but his arm will never draw a bow as before. For a warrior, such an injury meant more than pain. It threatened identity purpose. I'm sorry, Julia whispered. This happened because of me. Hawk in Mist's uninjured hand brushed hers. My choice, he stated with quiet dignity, would make same choice again. Running Deer shooed Julia away with fluttering hands, the elder translating. She says you disturb her patient. He needs rest, not white girl tears. Outside, Julia found Mary engaged with several tribal women, already establishing herself as useful rather than merely curious. The chief Stand Tall says we can stay tonight, Mary reported, but must decide our path by morning. The tribe moves camp tomorrow. Wallace's men have been seen too close lately. A commotion at the camp's edge drew attention. A young scout delivered an urgent report to Stand Tall, whose expression darkened with each word. "What's happening?" Julia asked Mary, who had moved closer to listen. "Riders approaching from the south." She translated grimly. "At least a dozen men heavily armed." The scout recognized Madame Scarlet's driver among them. Stand Tall approached them with swift purpose. "You bring danger to my people," he stated flatly. "These men who come, they seek only you or my tribe as well. They want us," Mary answered honestly. "But they won't hesitate to kill any Comanche who stand in their way. Judge Wallace has been looking for an excuse to drive your people from these lands for years." The chief nodded grimly. "Then you cannot stay. The tribe will scatter into the hills by hidden paths." But Julia had noticed something in his reaction to Wallace's name, a tightening of jaw, a flash of personal hatred. "You know Judge Wallace," she stated rather than asked. Stand Tall's eyes narrowed. "Wallace takes Comanche land, poisons water, shoots our young men." He paused, internal conflict visible, before adding, "Takes our women. My sister's daughter is among those he holds." The revelation changed everything. "We're going to his ranch," Julia told him, "to free the women he's holding captive. One is Mary's sister. If your niece is there too, help us." Stand Tall studied them with new intensity. "2 women against Wallace's guards. This is death walk, not rescue." "Not just 2 women," Mary countered. "Not if the Comanche have reason to fight as well." Something shifted in Stand Tall's assessment of them, respect kindling in his eyes. He led them to his teepee, unrolling a crude map on tanned hide. Using charcoal, he marked the layout of Wallace's ranch, the main house, bunkhouse, stables, and a separate structure behind. "This place," he indicated the smaller building, "holds the captives. 2 guards always. Windows too small for escape. 1 door only." Mary pointed to a thin line that ran from a nearby hill to the rear of the compound. "What's this?" "The water pipe," Stand Tall explained. "Ranch takes water from mountain spring. Pipe runs underground but exposed here where it crosses gully." Julia and Mary exchanged significant looks, a possible way, in that bypassed guards and fences. Their planning was interrupted by urgent calls from outside. Stand Tall listened to reports and then announced, "They come faster than expected. You must leave now." 2 warriors approached with horses ready, one for Julia to ride north, with Comanche guides another for Mary to take west, creating split trails their pursuers would have to divide forces to follow. Before separating, Julia insisted on one final visit to Hawk and Mist. She found him more alert, watching her preparation with understanding. "That you go," he stated, not a question but an observation. "We're going to Judge Wallace's ranch," she explained. "There are women being held captive there. One is Mary's sister, another is Stand Tall's niece. We're going to free them." Instead of calling her foolish, Hawk and Mist's eyes kindled with fierce approval. "Good hunting," he said. "The judge has much to answer for." His hand moved to a pouch at his waist, extracting a small carved stone pendant on a leather cord, a hawk in flight. "Take this, for protection." The gift moved Julia deeply. "Until I see you again," she promised, slipping the cord over her head. Outside, Mary waited to say goodbye. "Head north with the warriors," she instructed. "In 3 days, if you aren't followed, circle back to Devil's Rock." She pointed to a distinctive formation visible in the distance. "I'll meet you there at noon. If I'm not there by sundown." "You will be," Julia interrupted. Mary's smile was grim, but determined. "Sarah's window is on the east side of that building, 3rd from the end. She needs to know someone came for her." They embraced briefly. Then Mary mounted and rode west, creating a clear trail for pursuers to follow. Julia watched until she disappeared over a rise, then turned to her own escort, 2 lean warriors, introduced as Runsfar and Eagle Eye. The timing proved fortunate. They had covered less than a mile when a dust cloud on the southern horizon signaled approaching riders. From their elevated position, Julia watched the pursuers divide at the abandoned camp. 4 following Mary's western trail, 4 tracking north. 4 follow us, Eagle Eye observed tersely. 4 follow woman, rest stay at camp. They rode hard through the afternoon, using every trick the Comanche warriors knew to confuse their trail. By sunset, they had put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers, but the trackers remained doggedly behind them. When they made camp in a sheltered hollow, Julia was so exhausted she could barely dismount. Yet sleep proved elusive, as questions without answers circled in her mind. Had Mary successfully eluded her pursuers? Was Hawk and Mist's wound healing? What awaited them at Judge Wallace's ranch? Morning came too soon. Their journey continued with increasing urgency as their pursuers gained ground overnight. By mid-afternoon, disaster struck Julia's mount, stumbled on loose stone, and came up lame. They were forced to halt in a small copse beside a stagnant waterhole, their options dwindling with each passing minute. They come, Runs Far reported after scouting their back trail. Less than an hour behind. The warriors exchanged calculating looks that Julia had learned to read. "You're thinking of making a stand here," she guessed. Runs Far nodded once. "Good place die," he said with typical Comanche pragmatism. "Better than running until horses fall." "No," Julia decided abruptly. "No one dies for me today." She pointed to rugged hills nearby. "Can we reach those hills on foot, hide in caves?" Eagle Eye considered the terrain. "Many caves there, good hiding places, but tracks easy to follow." "Then we don't leave tracks," Julia said, inspiration striking. "We use the water." The suggestion earned her respect from the warriors. They worked quickly, sending their horses galloping westward to create a false trail while they entered the stream that fed the waterhole, moving carefully on slippery stones to leave no prints. They followed the stream for over an hour before reaching rocky foothills, leaving the water at a point where it tumbled over stone shelves, creating no discernible exit marks. The hills proved challenging, steep, crumbling shale faces, requiring careful navigation. Julia's hands were soon raw from catching herself on sharp edges. Eagle Eye suddenly raised his hand for silence. They froze, listening intently. Voices carried from the plain below of their pursuers had reached the waterhole and were now splitting forces too, tracking the horses west, while 2 examined the area with increasing frustration. One face Julia recognized with a surge of fear, Madame Scarlet's enforcer, a brutish man who delivered punishments to disobedient girls. The other was unfamiliar, but clearly skilled in tracking, for it was he who eventually approached the stream with suspicious scrutiny. "They figure it out soon," Runs Far whispered. "Must keep moving." They retreated deeper into the hills, until Eagle Eye led them to a narrow fissure in the rock face, barely visible, unless standing directly before it. The crack widened into a passage that twisted deep into the hillside opening, eventually into a small cave chamber. "Old Comanche hiding place," Eagle Eye explained. "Used when Utes hunt us many winters ago. White men not know it. It was a defensible position. A single narrow entrance, natural openings high in the walls for air, and surveillance nearly invisible from outside. Still, if their pursuers tracked them this far, they would eventually find the cave." Runs Far acknowledged this reality by checking his weapons, a revolver with limited ammunition, and a hunting knife he honed to razor sharpness. Their fears proved justified when Eagle Eye returned from a scouting position near the entrance with grim news. "Bad news. They find where we leave stream. Follow our trail uphill." "How long?" Julia asked. "Before dark," he estimated. 2 hours, maybe less. Runs Far joined them, expression unchanged, but tension evident in his posture. "We fight here," he declared. "Good place for ambush. Narrow path, they come one by one." It was sound tactical thinking, but strategically hopeless. Even if they managed to eliminate 1 or 2 pursuers initially, they would eventually be overwhelmed. What about smoke? Julia suggested, recalling a story her father had told. a signal fire that makes them think we're elsewhere in these hills. The warriors exchanged thoughtful glances. Might work, Runs Far conceded. Draw some away. Their plan succeeded initially. 3 pursuers diverted to investigate smoke rising from the opposite hillside, while only 1 remained to secure their original search area. Using this distraction, they descended the backside of their hill, following a dry wash until they reached open grassland stretching toward distant mountains. Need cover by night. Runs Far stated. Too open here. Eagle Eye pointed to a smudge of darkness against the plains. Buffalo Wallow, deep. Good hiding. They reached the depression, a natural hollow, where generations of bison had created a circular pit 5 feet deep, just as dusk deepened into true night. As they settled into this minimal shelter, new sounds reached them, hoofbeats approaching rapidly from the east. The warriors tensed, weapons ready, but Julia grabbed Runs Far's arm. Wait, she whispered urgently. That's not them. Listen to the pattern, too many horses moving too fast. Within minutes, the thundering hooves resolved into approximately 15 riders who reined in at the wallow's edge. In the fading light, Julia recognized the imposing figure of Stand Tall. Here, we're here, she called, standing, despite Eagle Eye's attempt to keep her concealed. The chief dismounted, peering down with evident surprise. You live, he observed. Good. We come to collect your bodies, give proper ceremony. Finding you alive saves much work. The dry humor startled a laugh from Julia, a sound of near hysterical relief. Stand Tall explained their presence. White men attack our camp after you leave. Find old woman and wounded one. We return in time, drive them off. His expression darkened. 2 warriors dead, 1 white man captured. Hawk and Mist, Julia asked anxiously. Lives with Stand Tall, confirmed. Running deer hit him in cave, they not find. Relief washed through Julia before she asked, the captured white man, who is he? Driver for woman who owns you before, Stand Tall replied. Says they hunt you to bring back to judge. Says judge pays much gold for girls like you. His jaw tightened. Says some captives are Comanche girls stolen from villages. My sister's daughter among them. That's why we're going there, Julia told him directly. To free them. Will you help us? Stand Tall studied her in the gathering darkness. 3 days, he finally decided. Meet at Devil's Rock. Bring warriors. It was both promise and dismissal. The chief instructed 2 of his men to give their mounts to Julia and the scouts. Return to camp, he ordered them. Rest, prepare. The journey back proved uneventful. At camp, Julia found Hawk and Mist propped on his pallet, pale but alert. You return, he observed as she entered. Sooner than expected, Julia sank beside him, recounting their narrow escape and Stand Tall's agreement to help attack Wallace's ranch. Hawk and Mist's expression shifted from surprise to cold determination. I will come, he stated flatly. You can't, Julia protested. Your wound will not prevent me from riding, he interrupted. Or shooting with my right arm. The judge must answer for his crimes against my people. The next 2 days passed in preparation. Julia recovered her strength with regular meals and uninterrupted sleep. The Comanche women, initially wary, gradually warmed to her. Running Deer took particular interest in Julia's welfare, presenting her with a gift, a hunting knife in a beaded sheath. For protection. Hawk and Mist translated as the elderly healer pressed the weapon into Julia's hands. She says a woman should always have means to defend herself against men with bad intentions. As the appointed day approached, Julia prepared to leave for Devil's Rock, where she hoped to reunite with Mary. Despite Running Deer's vehement protests, Hawk and Mist insisted on joining her. His wound improved, but still painful. They rode at a measured pace toward the distinctive red sandstone formation that thrust up from the plain like a clenched fist. As they approached, Julia scanned the horizon anxiously for any sign of Mary. The sun had already passed its zenith, with no sign of her companion. We wait, Hawk and Mist decided, as they established a small camp in the rock formation's shadow. Until sundown, as she said. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. When the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Julia's hope faltered. Had Mary been captured, killed? There, one warrior suddenly announced, pointing southeast. "Rider comes." A solitary figure approached on horseback. As the rider drew nearer, distinctive features became visible, a woman's shape, fair hair, catching the late afternoon light. Mary, Julia called, waving frantically, "Over here." But as the rider approached, Julia's elation turned to confusion. This woman was younger, perhaps 16, gaunt and haunted-looking. She reined in her horse at the rock formation's base, regarding the assembled Comanche warriors fearfully before her gaze settled on Julia. "Are you Julia?" she asked, voice barely audible. "I am," Julia confirmed. "Who are you? Where's Mary?" The girl's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "My name's Sarah," she managed. "Mary's sister. She sent me to find you. But how you were at the judge's ranch?" "I escaped." Sarah interrupted, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Mary helped me, but she—" Her voice broke. "She didn't make it out." The stark words hit Julia like a physical blow. What happened? Sarah's story emerged in fragments. 3 days earlier, Mary had been captured by Madame Scarlet's men and taken directly to Judge Wallace's ranch. When locked in with the other captives, she had immediately recognized Sarah and started planning. She created a diversion during our evening meal. Sarah explained between sips from Julia's canteen. Started a small fire in our building. In the confusion, she got me a horse and directions to Devil's Rock. She was supposed to follow. Sarah continued, wiping tears from her dirt-streaked face. We planned it. I'd go first, she'd create a second diversion, and meet me at the creek. But the guards... She trailed off. "The guards what?" Julia pressed, dreading the answer. "They shot her," Sarah whispered. I heard it as I rode away. 3 shots, then nothing. Grief and rage warred within Julia's chest. Mary, brave, resourceful Mary, who had risked everything to save her sister, gunned down in her moment of near escape. "Did she tell you about our plan?" Julia finally asked. "About the Comanche helping us?" Sarah nodded hesitantly. "She said you were gathering forces to free all the girls. That I should tell you everything I know about the ranch." The young woman's first-hand knowledge of guard rotations, security measures, and the captives' daily routines proved invaluable. By the time Stand Tall arrived with the main Comanche force at twilight, a comprehensive strategy had emerged. "We attack tomorrow," the chief decided once all details had been shared. Night of no moon. The timing was fortuitous, and the next night would be moonless, providing optimal darkness for their approach. Stand Tall outlined his battle plan. The main Comanche force would create a diversion at the ranch's front entrance, while a smaller group, including Julia, Hawk, and Mist, and Sarah would approach from the rear using the exposed water pipe crossing. As they prepared, Sarah revealed critical information. "There's something else you should know about the judge. He doesn't just sell the girls or keep them for himself. He collects information, makes them tell secrets about their families, their previous lives. Then he uses those secrets for blackmail. That's why he prefers educated girls," Julia realized. Sarah nodded. "He has a special book, red leather with a brass lock. Keeps it in his study in a drawer with a hidden compartment. That's where he records everything: who bought which girl, what secrets he's gathered, who pays for protection." This information was invaluable, precisely the documentation that could bring down not just the judge, but his entire network. Julia committed the description to memory. They departed as the sun kissed the western horizon, riding single file to minimize their dust trail. The main force, led by Stan Tall, separated at a predetermined point to approach from the east, while Julia's group continued south toward the waterpipe crossing. Darkness settled fully around them, the promised moonless night delivering perfect conditions. The pipe proved more substantial than expected, nearly 2 feet in diameter, made of cast iron segments bolted together at regular intervals. It ran along a ravine bottom for approximately 50 yards before disappearing underground in both directions. Water enough for many cattle? Hawk in Mist observed quietly. Judge steals from springs that feed Comanche hunting grounds. One warrior produced tools from his pack, a wrench and pry bar clearly stolen or traded from white settlers. With practiced movements, he began loosening bolts at a pipe junction. "What are they doing?" Sarah whispered. "Creating our entrance," Julia explained. "If the pipe connects to the ranch's water supply, removing a section should give us access to whatever cistern or holding tank they use inside." After nearly half an hour of painstaking effort, they succeeded in removing a 4-foot section, revealing the dark channel within. A shallow stream flowed through the bottom portion, leaving enough space above for a person to crawl through. "I go first." One warrior volunteered, removing bulkier clothing to fit into the confined space. Long minutes passed before he reappeared at the opening. "Pipe goes to stone room," he reported in broken English. "No guards. Door not locked." One by one, they entered the pipe, crawling through the damp, confined space with weapons strapped to their backs. Julia's journey became a nightmare of claustrophobic panic. Several times she froze, convinced she could go no further, only to feel Sarah's gentle pressure from behind, urging her forward. After what seemed an eternity, she emerged into a small stone chamber dimly illuminated by moonlight, filtering through a barred window. The pump house contained a large holding tank into which the main pipe emptied, with smaller pipes branching to various buildings. A wooden door provided access outside, secured only by a simple latch. Through the barred window, Julia could see portions of the compound, the main house light glowing from several windows, and closer, the windowless building Sarah had identified as the captives' quarters. Between their position and objectives lay an open yard, occasionally crossed by patrolling guards with lanterns. "Wait," Hawk in Mist advised, watching through the window. "Signal soon." As if summoned, commotion erupted at the front of the compound, shouts of alarm, followed by rifle fire. Stan Tall's diversion had begun on schedule, drawing guards toward the eastern perimeter. "Now." Hawk in Mist directed, easing the door open and slipping outside. They moved in rapid succession toward the captives' building, using available cover water troughs, wood piles, equipment sheds to conceal their approach. At the captives' quarters, they encountered their first direct obstacle. A single guard at the door, distracted by the commotion from the front. Before he could react, one Comanche warrior brought him down with a thrown knife to the throat, catching the body before it fell noisily. Sarah stepped forward, hands shaking, but voice steady. "Lisa, Anna, it's Sarah. I've come back with help." After a moment of shocked silence, multiple female voices responded in urgent whispers. The door was locked from outside, but the key hung on a nail beside the frame. Perimeter security, apparently considered sufficient to prevent escape. When Julia turned the key and swung the door open, the scene within broke her heart. 8 young women huddled together in a sparsely furnished room, all bearing visible bruises or other marks of abuse. Most shocking were the crude brands visible on several exposed shoulders, the W that Mary had described, burned into human flesh. "We need to hurry," Julia told them quietly. "We're here to free you, but must move quickly and quietly." One girl, slightly older than the rest, with unmistakable Comanche features, stepped forward. "Some cannot walk well," she stated plainly. "The judge's son visited yesterday. He is not gentle." Julia suppressed her rage in favor of practical action. "Those who can walk will help those who cannot." Stan Tall's niece was quickly identified, a slender girl of perhaps 16 with defiant eyes, who despite her ordeal maintained a proud bearing. Upon seeing her Comanche rescuers, she spoke rapidly in their language, receiving solemn nods. With the captives secured, they split forces as planned. 4 warriors would escort the women back through the pump house to waiting horses, while Julia, Hawk, and Mist, Sarah, and 2 additional warriors would proceed to the main house for the judge's documentation. Their smaller group slipped toward the main house, finding a servant's entrance unguarded in the confusion. Sarah led them confidently through the kitchen and up a narrow back staircase into a hallway lined with expensive artwork and hunting trophies. "This way," Sarah whispered, pointing toward an oak door at the corridor's end. His study. As they approached, the door suddenly swung inward. A middle-aged man in an expensive dressing gown appeared, revolver already raised, as if expecting intruders. His eyes widened in recognition as he spotted Sarah. "You," he snarled, weapon trained on her. "The ungrateful little bitch who burned my property." Before he could fire, one of the Comanche warriors loosed an arrow that struck the judge's forearm, causing him to drop the gun with a howl of pain. Hawk and Mist moved with surprising speed despite his injury, tackling the larger man and pinning him against the wall with a knife at his throat. "Judge Wallace, I presume," Julia said, stepping forward. Wallace's eyes bulged with impotent rage. "Who the hell are you? Do you have any idea who I am? The power I wield in this territory?" "I know exactly who you are," Julia replied, voice steady despite her pounding heart. "A slaver, a rapist, a murderer, a man who brands women like cattle." Recognition dawned in Wallace's eyes. "You're the brothel girl Scarlet was preparing for me." His gaze shifted to Hawk and Mist with naked contempt. "The one who escaped with that savage. I prefer to think of myself as the woman who's going to destroy you," Julia corrected, moving past him into his study. "Sarah, show me where he keeps the red book." With trembling hands, Sarah pointed to an ornate desk. "Bottom right drawer. There's a false bottom." Julia quickly located the drawer, finding it locked. A letter opener from the desktop made short work of the simple mechanism. Inside, as described, she discovered a hidden compartment containing a red, leather-bound book secured with a brass lock. This, too, yielded easily to the letter opener's pressure. Inside were meticulous records of Wallace's criminal enterprise, names of girls purchased, amounts paid, their ultimate destinations. Notes on information extracted and leveraged for financial gain. A list of powerful men throughout the territory who had visited the ranch for special entertainments. "And found what we need," Julia announced, gathering the most incriminating documents. A sudden commotion from the hallway pulled her attention. Emerging from the study, she found chaos. The judge had somehow broken free, blood streaming from his neck, where Hawk and Mist's knife had cut deeper in the struggle. One Comanche warrior lay wounded on the floor, while the other grappled with Wallace, preventing him from reaching a mounted rifle on the wall. Hawk and Mist, dazed from apparently being struck during the escape attempt, struggled to regain his feet. Sarah stood frozen against the wall, paralyzed by the violence. Wallace succeeded in throwing off his opponent long enough to grab the rifle. He swung around, aiming not at the warriors, but directly at Julia, face contorted with hatred. "You whores are all the same," he spat. "Think you're worth something. Think you can ruin a man like me." His finger tightened on the trigger. "I should have branded you when I had the chance." The gunshot that followed seemed to happen in slow motion. Julia saw the flash from the rifle barrel, felt searing pain across her upper arm as the bullet grazed rather than finding its intended target in her heart. Then something extraordinary happened. Sarah, emerging from her paralysis with primal ferocity, launched herself at her former tormentor with a scream of accumulated rage. The knife that Running Deer had gifted to Julia, now clutched in Sarah's hand, plunged into Wallace's chest with all the girl's desperate strength. The judge staggered backward, astonishment replacing hatred as he looked down at the blade protruding from his body. His rifle clattered to the floor as he collapsed against the wall, leaving a smear of blood as he slid down. "You," he gasped, staring at Sarah in disbelief. "Little mouse. Never thought had it in you." His eyes glazed as blood bubbled from his lips. With a final rattling breath, Judge Wallace, pillar of frontier society, respected legal authority, architect of countless women's suffering, died on the expensive carpet of his opulent hallway. Sarah stood trembling uncontrollably, hands covered in his blood. Julia moved to her side, gently turning the girl away from her dead captor. "It's over," she whispered, holding Sarah as sobs racked her thin frame. "He can't hurt anyone ever again." Outside, the sounds of conflict intensified rather than diminishing. The diversion had apparently escalated into full engagement, as ranch hands and guards realized the compound had been infiltrated. More concerning flames, now visible through windows, indicated fire spreading rapidly across one side of the compound. "We must go," Hawk and Mist urged, having recovered enough to help the injured warrior. "Take Book's leave now." Their planned escape route through the servants' entrance was already compromised, black smoke billowing up the back staircase. Hawk and Mist led them to a window overlooking the side yard, where fire hadn't yet reached. "Our jump," he instructed, sliding the sash open. "Roll when hit ground." The drop of 15 feet was dangerous, but survivable with proper technique. The injured warrior demonstrated the rolling landing before Julia helped Sarah through. When Julia's turn came, she hesitated momentarily, clutching the precious documents. "No, you changed path of river," Hawk and Mist said softly, using an earlier metaphor from their conversations. "Many lives flow different direction now." Julia nodded, then launched herself from the window. Despite her best efforts, the landing sent pain shooting through her ankle, but she managed to stand. Hawk and Mist followed his landing, hampered by his existing wound, but executed with surprising grace. They made their way back to the pump house, finding it unguarded in the general chaos. The pipe that had provided their entry now served as escape route, though navigating its confines proved even more challenging with injuries and precious documents. When they emerged on the other side, they found most of the rescued captives already mounted with the Comanche warriors who had escorted them ready to depart. Stand Tall and several men waited anxiously, having disengaged from their diversion when fire threatened to trap their companions. "Judge is dead," Hawk and Mist reported succinctly. "Girl killed him." He nodded towards Sarah with evident respect. "We have papers, names, proof." Stand Tall absorbed this with a grave nod. "Good death for bad man," he assessed. "Now we go before more white men come." They rode through the night, putting distance between themselves and the burning ranch. By dawn, they reached a secluded valley that Stand Tall deemed safe for temporary rest. The rescued women were in varying states of distress, some weeping quietly, others sitting in stunned silence, a few displaying fierce resilience in their expressions. As Comanche women tended the most injured captives, Julia found a quiet spot to examine the documents. The Red Book proved even more comprehensive than first realized, a meticulous record spanning nearly a decade, documenting not just trafficking, but land seizures, extortion, and corruption of territorial officials. Then she found an entry that paralyzed her heart, her own family's farm listed as a potential acquisition, with a chilling addendum: daughter secured as partial payment through Scarlet. Father believes temporary arrangement. No recovery option to be provided. Even more shocking was a notation on the following page. A name that stopped her breath: E. Jensen's secondary asset, from same property reserved for specialty client. Elizabeth Jensen. Julia's younger sister, just 14 when Julia had left the farm. With trembling fingers, she found a transaction record dated 2 months after her own sale to the brothel. E. Jensen delivered to Colorado buyer. Highest price to date for untouched merchandise. The clinical language describing her sister's fate made Julia physically ill. Elizabeth, sweet, shy Elizabeth, who had cried when Julia left, had been taken sold to some unnamed buyer in Colorado. Are bad news in words? Hawk and Mist asked, approaching quietly to sit beside her. My sister. Julia managed her voice barely audible. He took my sister too. Sold her to someone in Colorado. My parents probably think she ran away. They might not even know she's gone. Hawk and Mist's face remained impassive, but his eyes reflected understanding of her grief. Now you have new path, he observed after a respectful silence. Fine sister. The simple statement crystallized Julia's thoughts. The uncertainty about her future vanished, replaced by singular purpose. Yes. She agreed, newfound determination, steadying her voice. I will find her. Stand Tall approached them, having concluded a discussion with his warriors. We return to tribe today, he announced. Too dangerous to stay in one place. White men will hunt who burned Big Ranch. What about them? Julia asked, nodding toward the rescued women. Some are Comanche or other tribes. They return to people. White girls more difficult. He studied Julia thoughtfully. You take them to good white people, church women maybe. There's a Catholic mission in Fort Laramie, Julia recalled. The nuns there take in women regardless of their past. Stand Tall nodded approval. Good plan. 3 warriors go with you for protection. After girls safe, they bring you to territorial capital with paper proof. He gestured to the documents. Then white man's law must work, or Comanche justice will. What about you? Julia asked Hawk and Mist, realizing they would soon part ways. He shook his head. I go with you, he stated simply. To mission, to capital. Then help find sister. Julia hadn't expected this continued alliance. Your wound needs proper healing, she protested. And you said you wanted to find your own family. Wound heals while riding, he replied pragmatically. Family waited many seasons, can wait few more. His gaze held hers. Debt not paid yet. Debt, Julia echoed in confusion. Not that kind of debt, he clarified. Debt to sister. My sister died because I failed to find her in time. His expression softened. Maybe helping you find your sister balances scales. By midday, preparations for departure were complete. The group split as planned, majority of Comanche returning to their tribe with indigenous captives, while Julia, Hawk and Mist, 3 warriors, and 5 rescued white women made for Fort Laramie. As they prepared to part ways, Stand Tall approached Julia with a small leather pouch. For journey, he said. Gold from Judge's house. Justice payment. Sarah announced her decision to accompany them to Fort Laramie, rather than returning with the Comanche. I want to help the others adjust, she explained quietly. And then, maybe the mission needs help with other girls like us. Their journey east began under clear skies, the small party moving at a measured pace. On their second night, camped in a sheltered draw, one of the rescued women, Catherine, approached Julia as she kept first watch. I heard you talking about your sister, Catherine said hesitantly. The one sent to Colorado. Julia tensed. Do you know something about her? Catherine nodded slowly. I was at the ranch longer than most. Girls came and went. I remember one named Elizabeth arrived about 7 months ago, stayed only 2 weeks before a buyer came for her. Hope and dread warred in Julia's chest. Did she mention her family? She talked about a farm in Wyoming territory, about her older sister who had gone away to earn money during the drought. Catherine's eyes held sympathetic understanding. She believed her sister would come back for her someday. Said her sister always kept her promises. The words pierced Julia's heart. Elizabeth had held on to hope that Julia would return to save her, never knowing Julia herself had been trapped in Madame Scarlet's brothel. Do you know where they took her? Julia asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Catherine's expression grew troubled. Only rumors. The man who came was well-dressed, spoke with an accent, Eastern, maybe Boston. Paid in gold. I overheard a guard say he was taking her to Denver to some kind of exclusive establishment. Denver, a starting point for her search. Thank you, Julia said sincerely. It means more than you know. There's something else, Catherine added. The judge kept an address book, names and locations of his business associates, including buyers. Black leather with silver corners. It was in his desk. Julia's heart sank. In their escape's chaos, they hadn't thought to search for additional documentation. If such a book existed, it had likely burned with the ranch. The remainder of their journey passed without incident. At Fort Laramie, the Catholic mission proved their salvation. The Mother Superior, stern-faced but kind-eyed, asked few questions when presented with traumatized young women needing shelter. God's mercy extends to all his children, she stated simply, whatever their past circumstances. Sarah elected to remain at the mission. I think I can help here, she told Julia. The sisters are kind, but they don't understand what we've been through. I do. Julia hugged the brave young woman. Mary would be proud of you. Sarah's eyes shimmered at her sister's mention. Find Elizabeth, she replied. Bring her home, for both of us. With the women safely settled, Julia, Hawk, and Mist and the 3 Comanche warriors prepared for the journey to the territorial governor in Cheyenne. Before departing, Julia visited the telegraph office, sending messages to newspaper offices announcing a forthcoming expose of judicial corruption and human trafficking. Insurance, she explained to Hawk and Mist. If something happens before we reach the governor, newspapers will start asking questions. He nodded approvingly. Smart, like wolf making many tracks to confuse hunter. Their arrival in Cheyenne created an immediate sensation, a young white woman, with 4 indigenous men clearly operating as a unit, riding directly to the Territorial Administration building. To Julia's surprise, they found the governor already alarmed by telegrams regarding Wallace's death and his ranch's destruction. The newspapers Julia had contacted had published teasing previews of a major corruption story. When presented with the Red Book and supporting documentation, the governor, a political appointee with presidential ambitions, recognized both the scandal's severity and potential advantage in positioning himself as its prosecutor. Within hours, he assembled an investigative committee and dispatched marshals to arrest several of Wallace's associates. And the women, Julia pressed. The ones trafficked across territorial lines, will your investigation extend to finding and freeing them as well? When the governor hedged about resources, Julia countered boldly. Find them, or I take these documents directly to the Chicago Tribune. Their reporter arrived yesterday, very interested in frontier justice. The threat worked. Within days, the governor established a task force specifically for identifying and locating Wallace's victims, with Julia appointed as special advisor, a political maneuver to incorporate her rather than leave her as a critic. For Hawk and Mist and his companions, the resolution seemed inadequate. Still, the documentation contained enough evidence of specific crimes against Comanche women that some measure of justice appeared possible. Not enough, Hawk and Mist observed as they left the governor's office. But better than nothing. With official business concluded, the Comanche warriors prepared to return to their tribe. As they departed, Julia turned to Hawk and Mist, who had remained silent about his own plans. Will you go with them? She asked, trying to keep her tone neutral despite the hollow feeling it created. He shook his head slightly. Told you. Help find sister first. Relief washed through her. We leave for Denver tomorrow then, she decided. That evening, as they prepared for their journey, Julia found herself contemplating how dramatically her life had transformed. From captive to liberator victim to advocate, she had discovered strength never known she possessed. Thank you, she said to Hawk and Mist as they shared a simple meal. Not just for saving me that night, but for treating me like a person with value when everyone else saw merchandise. Hawk and Mist considered before responding. In my language, he finally said, "there is word ein anevetanotse, means one who becomes newly alive. When person survives great suffering, emerges stronger with new purpose." He studied her face with quiet intensity. "This is what I see in you. Not victim I saved. Warrior who saved herself." The perspective startled Julia. She had focused so much on what she had lost, innocent security time with family, that she failed to recognize what she had gained: resilience, agency, and purpose that might have remained dormant throughout a conventional life. "Do you think we'll find her?" she asked, returning to the quest, now defining her path. "Cannot promise," he answered honestly. "But we'll not stop until we know truth. Whether good or bad truth, better than wondering." As dawn broke over Cheyenne the following morning, Julia was startled from preparation by a commotion outside their boarding house. A stagecoach had arrived unusual at this early hour, and from it descended a haggard-looking woman whose face, despite exhaustion and trail dust, Julia instantly recognized. "Mary," she whispered in disbelief, rushing outside. Mary, impossibly miraculously alive, stood swaying slightly in the street, one arm bandaged and held in a crude sling. Her eyes widened at the sight of Julia. "You made it," Mary said hoarsely. "Sarah did Sarah. She's safe." Julia assured her, embracing her gently to avoid her injury. "At the mission in Fort Laramie." "But how Sarah said the guards shot you." Mary's laugh held no humor. "They did." She gestured to her wounded arm. "But it takes more than Wallace's men to kill me. I played dead until they left, and then one of the other girls helped bind my wounds." Her expression darkened. "I've spent the last week tracking you, following rumors of a white woman traveling with Comanche warriors. Thought I might find you at the governor's office." When Hawk and Mist appeared in the boarding house doorway, Mary offered him a respectful nod. "Your plan worked," she told him. "The judge, dead," Julia confirmed. "Sarah killed him." Something fierce and proud flashed across Mary's face. "Good." She reached into her coat with her uninjured arm, withdrawing a small book bound in black leather with silver corners. "I thought you might need this. Went back to the ranch after the fire died down. Most of the place was ashes, but the study safe survived." Julia stared in astonishment at the judge's address book, the very document Catherine had described, thought lost in the fire. "How did you know to look for this?" Mary's smile was grim. "Because I spent 2 years learning everything about the man who took my sister. Knew exactly where he kept his most valuable possessions." She handed Julia the book. "This should help find your sister in Denver, and anyone else Wallace sold." The unexpected development electrified their plans. With both the detailed transaction records and the address book of buyers, their search for Elizabeth had transformed from desperate quest to methodical hunt. As they prepared to depart the next morning now, 3 instead of 2, Julia found a moment alone with Mary. "I still don't understand why you didn't tell us you were alive," she said quietly. "Why let Sarah believe you were dead?" Mary's expression clouded with old pain. "Because I wasn't sure I would survive. Bullet took a bad path." She hesitated, then continued with brutal honesty. "And because Sarah needed to believe I was gone to find her own strength. As long as I was alive, she'd always be waiting for me to save her." Her eyes found her sister's pendant, which Julia now wore alongside Hawk and Mist's carved hawk. Some people need to be freed from their rescuers, as well as their captors. The insight revealed depths to Mary that Julia hadn't suspected, a wisdom born of suffering that saw beyond immediate comfort to longer healing. It reminded Julia of Running Deer's gift, a knife, not a shield. The means to fight, rather than merely protection. Their journey to Denver would be long and uncertain. Elizabeth might be found quickly or might require months of searching. The governor's task force might succeed in dismantling Wallace's network or might falter against entrenched corruption. The Comanche might see justice for their stolen daughters or might face continued atrocities from settlers emboldened by lack of consequences. Yet, as they rode west into the rising sun, Julia, Hawken, Mist, and Mary, something fundamental had shifted in the world. 3 people who had been intended as victims had instead become avenging forces. 3 separate paths of suffering had converged into a singular purpose that transcended personal vengeance. In Comanche stories, Hawk and Mist shared as they rode, "There is tale of 3 arrows. 1 arrow breaks easily. 3 arrows bundled cannot be broken." Mary nodded, understanding. My father had a similar saying, "A single thread may snap, but a rope of many threads holds fast." Julia touched the pendants at her throat, symbols of protection, remembrance, and promise. "Then we are arrows and threads together," she said, stronger for having found each other. Behind them, Cheyenne, diminished in the distance ahead, lay Denver and the uncertainty of their quest. But for the first time since being torn from her family's farm, Julia rode not toward something unknown and feared, but toward a future she herself was forging. The horizon stretched before them like a canvas, waiting to be painted with justice not yet won, sisters not yet found healing, not yet complete, but possible now, all of it possible, because mercy had somehow bloomed in the heart of the wild plains.